know any of that, but just FYI. So there we go. Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming on this morning for your little boardroom session. What I want to use these for is kind of a laser coaching and spend a little bit of time with each of you as you're kind of going from where you're at and where you want to go. So I know we got David, we got Michael in here, Rochelle, Chuck, and so forth. So, but yeah, kind of, give a little bit of quick 30-second background on exactly where you're at and where you're trying to go, and what you own currently, if anything. And then let's move you to the next step.
All right. Currently, I am in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I own about 4 single-family homes, looking to get into the multifamily arena. And so I am part of your mentorship, just started. I'm stuck on analyzing deals because not every, I guess, all the information, the flyers at OM have all the information that is requested on the deal analyzer. So that kind of got me stuck. And I did practice and send, I think like 3 properties in last night, but I'm sure there were a lot of errors on it. So, but I'm
Well, that's okay,
practicing.
but that's yeah, and that the good news is that's how you learn, right? You got to fumble through it and be okay with. I mean, it's not failure. It's just you got to learn, and we love that because then it allows the team to kind of say, okay, like you're doing all these things great. Here's some areas to improve on, and they can respond back on that. So it's kind of to address the question in the air about, hey, if you don't have all of the data from, say, the broker or the seller in terms of financials to take that information and put it into your deal analyzer, then how do you work with that scenario? Because that is, I would say 30% of the time, maybe 40% of the time, you may not have all the information. And when I say the information, there's a few pieces of info that you need in order to analyze the deal pretty quickly. The first and foremost is if the broker has an OM, which is basically their marketing piece about the property that gives all of this data in summary in terms of financials, market, property info, stuff like that, then you can just take that and plug that in. If they don't have that, or it's, a very basic one, then you can ask for, the rent roll, and then also the T12, which is essentially a profit and loss statement on the property for 12 months. Hence the term T12, time 12 months of time. And if you can get those 3 pieces of information, that allows you to get a decent feel and then plug that information into your deal analyzer, and it should start popping out some data for you. If it's not there, these are kind of some concepts to keep in mind for you. Since most of the deals that any of you and anybody will be dealing with is that class B and C property, like I was going over yesterday, meaning a 1980 property, or maybe even 1990 all the way down into the 60s, right? 1990 property all the way down into the 60s. And you're going to be buying most of them, outside of the coastal zones of the United States. You're going to be running at least at a 40% minimum expense ratio, meaning if you total up all the expenses on that deal analyzer, it should look at around 40%. That percentage at the bottom of that deal analyzer that says the expense ratio should show at least 40% or greater. So some ways to kind of work around if you don't have all the expense numbers is to just plug a gross number in there to where it gets you to 40%. Does that make sense, Rochelle?
Yeah. Yes.
So like if you didn't have all the detail on the expenses, you could just plug in a number into the current and the pro forma that equals 40% at the bottom of it. And what I mean by that is, let me pull this up. I'll show you. And we'll share here in just a second. This will be helpful for anybody that's looking at this, because it does come up quite a bit when you don't have all of the data, right?
Right.
And you need those pieces. Okay.
Right. Then I get nervous that I don't have all the information, and then I'm getting, a
Sure.
false sense of security if it's a good deal or not.
Right. Yeah. So that's a key point to address, because it's going to come up for anybody looking at a property. So I'm going to pull this up. I'll give this to you, Karim, to share. So stand by. Share that, and then so he'll have something to share here. So there we go. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if you come down here, right there, right? Okay. So that's the part, and keep in mind, you have the two deal analyzers. This is the simple one, but it's good because anything under 50 units, this thing is designed for, right? Which is in most people's case when you get started. But yeah, that expense ratio should be 40% or greater on all the deals that you're going to be doing, right? Okay. Especially your first ones. Anything 1990 to 1960s, it's going to be at 40 to 50% is where that number should roll in on a gross number. So let's say you didn't have any of the data. You're like just guessing, because I was actually dealing with this the other day with someone. You would actually come in here, wipe all these out, and then I would just put in a number in here, right, to get me to that number, just to start to play ball, right?
Okay. So
now I just have a gross number in there for my expenses, because maybe you have the revenue and then you don't have all the expense numbers, or vice versa. It's harder if you don't have the revenue numbers. Like, you got to figure that number out, because that's probably the most critical. We know, generally speaking, what the expenses are going to look like for a type of property, meaning 1990 to 1965. I know, generally speaking, that your expense ratio should run right around 40 to 50%.
Okay.
I mean, period. So that's why it's, when you look at that, it'll tell you that. Okay. And then it just comes down to the revenue. So over on the revenue side, you need to know what the current rents are. So the broker should be able to tell you that. I mean, obviously the property's occupied, and they're getting data, they're getting rents. So that should be there.
Okay.
And if you need to figure out, hey, well, what's the future rents look like? Right? If I don't have that data, you can go on, as the brokers were saying yesterday, you can use Rentometer, you can use Zillow, you can use some of these platforms to get an idea of, hey, my property condition is here. I'm getting below market rents. Here's some other properties nearby. They're getting better rents than me, and I'm going to move my property to that level. So that tells you, hey, I can bump rents maybe $100, $200 a month, because these properties are getting it around the corner and they're at a level that I'm going to be at. I'm going to take my property from where it's at to this benefit here, and I'm going to be able to boost my rents based on the comps. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So now you have an idea of where you can move the rents to, generally speaking. Keep in mind, when you're just pumping through these deals, it doesn't need to be exact or perfect. You're just trying to get a general idea, because you're gonna double check all these numbers, all of them, especially with the brokers. Because let's say you put in all these numbers and the deal gets to a point where you're like, yeah, I can make an offer, and regardless of what the price is, right? I never even worry about this. I was literally just going through a deal yesterday, and it was $1 million off. As you saw even yesterday when I was on screen, right? They're asking 4.2, and realistically that thing needs to sell for like 3.2. Right. That 32 unit in San Antonio, right? Mm-hmm. They're way off, right? They're in la la land, but that's okay. Like, don't ever worry about what they're asking. Worry about what the numbers are telling you. And then what you do is you send the offer over, and then you allow the broker to correct you. because this allows the broker to come in closer to you and build a rapport with the broker. So the best way to handle this is like, let's say you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I really like the deal. I'm going to go ahead and send the offer over regardless, even if it's $1 million off, doesn't matter. Send it over and then have a text message and a call with that broker right after saying, hey, I just sent you an LOI, a letter of intent, right? An offer on the property. It's way below. It's pretty aggressive, John broker. I'd like to get on the phone call real quick and go through it because I'd like you to help me out on where I'm missing the numbers, right? Where am I missing the numbers, broker? Right? And you're going to bring them into the process because what they're going to do is blow smoke up your, you know what, and tell you all kinds of things as, oh, well, you know, you can, you know, all that stuff that goes on. And that's okay. Let them ramble on, and you're using them to kind of build rapport, because at the end of the day, they need to be able to show you some concrete stuff. You know, hey, John, why in the world would I pay a 4.1 cap rate in San Antonio, Texas, when I can go to Southern California on the beach, literally on the beach, and I can get a 4 cap with a pristine property that I have no problems with ever renting for the rest of my life? Why in God's name would I pay a 4 cap in the middle of Texas? And they're going to have no answer to that. Zero. It's not the point, right? It's just to kind of put them in place saying, like,
right.
It makes a good point. And you're just building rapport, and you're doing it politely, right? But what it's going to do is set the tone for like, okay, I kind of know what I'm talking about. And you know, you're going to build the rapport with the broker and say, listen, John, I really actually like this deal. We're maybe way too far apart. Totally get it. The seller is not ready to sell at the market value, but I would love to see some more deals. If you have other stuff coming up, I like this type of stuff. I'm going to be buying in this area. I'd love to buy through you. Can I get on kind of your preferred email list? So that way, when you have deals, you can blast them out to me.
Gotcha.
Right? Because that's ultimately what you're trying to do, right? Is to get on as many preferred lists with brokers, because that's how the deal flow is going to come through on the pre-market stuff. That's going to start to really make sense from day one, not put it onto a website where you know that it doesn't. And that's what you're trying to do. But to get around kind of the data thing, this is how you would plug in your expense numbers if you didn't have all the expenses.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense for everybody on here? Yeah, realistically, I'm going to go through a couple of the questions real quick. So I see this from Mike and everybody. Stand by. Whoops. Where did that go? You're doing well. Where did my cursor go? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so just kind of looking at this, yeah, we got the echo out. So David had asked, realistically, do a lot of these brokers guard that list pretty closely, or are they generally willing to add someone? No, they'll add you on as long as you can kind of showcase, you know, you're building a relationship.
Right. And they've asked me that too. When I've gone on, when I've met or talked to them, they asked me a little bit about my background.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring the broker guys on yesterday, because that's your typical broker. Just so you know, Kevin, Jury, and Nick, when you're in this 10 to 30 unit space, which is where you're focusing for your first few deals, you know, you're dealing with a little more mom and pop, right? Mom and pop brokers, right? Kevin and those guys are, less than 10 years in the business, a little newer, tend to be younger, and they're rocking and rolling. But you heard Nick yesterday saying, yeah, I mean, if you're brand new, I'll deal with you, right? But it'd be great if you kind of have some ducks in a row. So that's why, you're being taught and you learn, and the kind of behind the scenes and being handheld. So that way, when you walk into some of these conversations, you kind of have some general idea of what you're talking about, right? That's the entire purpose. And then as you kind of go through this, you'll realize, okay, it's going to bring your level of knowledge up and skill set. And then, 100% they're going to deal with you, because they, when you're in this space, they're dealing with a lot of newbies. You heard Nick say that yesterday. I mean, 60, 70% of my clients are brand new, right? And so it's just a matter of understanding some of the process and the lingo and call it the glossary of terms to where you can talk with a basic level of understanding of an apartment building. Doesn't have to be sophisticated at all. But yeah, in terms of the data, if you don't have all the pieces, you definitely need the revenue and you need some basic property information in terms of the unit sizes, unit counts, some stuff like that. But any broker or even a seller, I mean, they have their rent roll. All of them have a rent roll. I mean, there's not a single, I don't care how mom and pop you are, they have a rent roll. They have a rent roll, meaning they have all the units that they own. They have the rent they're getting paid. They have the, bedroom bath count, and they have the square footages. Like every single one of them has that. I can guarantee it. So you can get that data. And then it just comes down to, well, do you have all your expense data? And some of them will, some of them won't. But based on what I'm showing you here, 1990 to 1965 properties, you're going to run between a 40 to 50% expense ratio, period. So you don't need to put in all the detail. If you just want to use a gross number, that will get you there to start to play ball.
Yeah, that'll be easier.
And then yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that'll be easier to just do it that way, I think.
Yeah, for some of the properties where you're like, hey, I want to run through them really quickly. If you have all the data, great, plug it in, because that's just more definite. But if you don't, you can guesstimate, knowing full well that you're going to be somewhere in that pocket of 40 to 50% on these deals. And yeah, it's great to know if you have other income and stuff like that, because that affects things, on that deal analyzer. If Karim can pull that up one more time. So sometimes they have the other income numbers, which on this deal analyzer, it's down here.
Okay.
So if you don't have that data either, you can guesstimate that too. So I would just ask the broker, well, are they getting, pet rent? Are they getting, admin fees? Do they have any other? I mean, they know this. 100% they know this. Give me are they doing any reimbursables for utilities, stuff like that? Because the other income number on any property can be a lot, right? I mean, think about this for a minute for anybody here. You're paying for water and like some of these utilities, right? You're paying for water, gas, stuff like that. Sometimes on these properties, you as the landlord. So getting reimbursed for those is pretty standard in the industry for a portion of them. Typically, you can get reimbursed probably up to 65% of those utility costs. I mean, imagine that. If your utilities are $10,000 a year and you can get reimbursed for $6,500 of it, I mean, that helps out a lot with cash flow, right? And so it's asking the broker a few of those questions, because that's what the other income line item means. It's all the other stuff that's outside of rent, meaning if they're paying pet rent, if they have any admin fees, late fees, maybe there are reimbursables for utilities, right? That's where that stuff goes. And we just put a lump sum number in there to keep it simple for everyone. And you can plug in that number into that cell. So it's trying to, if you don't have that data, you can maybe ask the broker, hey, broker, in terms of other income, like utilities, pet rent, admin, are they getting that? And what do you think that number is?
Okay.
Right. And that's how you would guesstimate that if you don't have all the data. So, yes, it does. So Chuck had asked a great question. Does the 40 to 50% include taxes and insurance? Yes, because if you look at the line items, we're including everything, right? So that's including property taxes, insurance, maintenance and repair. See that turnover line item? That's turnover of units. That's called make ready. So when you ever hear the terms turnover or make ready, that line item is specific to tenants move out and those units get turned. There's a specific cost that you would like to segment out for that cost. because that's outside of your typical maintenance and repairs, like your daily maintenance and repairs. And the reason why it's important to segment that number out is because you want to actually track that, right? Because I will tell you this, and this is why renewals are so critically important. I mean, if you want to make money, a big money in multifamily, keep people in your buildings. Because the cost, I can guarantee you, I don't care where you're at in the country, the minimum cost to you each time a tenant moves out of any of your buildings is $3,500. Minimum. Between lost rent, commissions to release the property, turnover costs to get that unit repainted, clean the carpet, make sure it's nice, ready to go for a new tenant to move in, all of that stuff, marketing, on and on and on. When you really calculate it, it's a minimum $3,500 every single time you turn over a unit. And people don't really calculate the true cost of that. And it's crazy when you do, because then you realize, crap. So how do I keep people in my building? Meaning I don't want anybody moving out ever unless there's a life event. Meaning they're buying a new house, somebody died, they're moving, getting jobs out of the state, right? They're relocating, whatever. I want a life event. But if you're moving out because you're pissed off, that's a problem. If we didn't fix your work orders and your repair items fast enough, that's a problem. Because you don't want that. That's a big no-no. So that's why you want to, get on these work orders, they call them, right, to repair items pretty quickly. Keep your tenants happy and keep them in those buildings. And think about it. Even if you have to give them a credit to stay there, right? Like we're doing in some of our buildings right now, where we're giving them a free month's rent. Meaning we'll go into it with a renewal notice saying, hey, we'll give you a $250 credit to renew. We'll start there. But if they give any kind of pushback, we'll ultimately say, listen, give us a 13-month lease and we'll give you a free month's rent. Because I know that the cost of them moving out is $3,500 minimum. And if I can give them $1,000 to save $3,500, that's why you do it. Make sense? It's very, very, very important.